really intrigued to hear that during the DCKO event, Mark Waid alongside Christopher Cantwell would be writing a couple of issues of the current ongoing Flash series tying into the event. Most people should know how I feel about Mark Waid's Flash run by now, so my intrigue was definitely justified. However, I feel this latest arc is bad, and I'm going to get into why I feel that way. But before I do that, I should say that because this is a tie-in event with a major event like DCKO, that you don't need to read that alongside the event, as it already gives you all the information on what the event is. That is barring issue 28, but I'll get into that eventually. Yeah, this is very confusing shit. Comics need to stop doing it, because I just hate having to buy a bunch of books that I do not care for just to fully understand one major event. But anyway, I'll save my complaints for DCKO when I eventually rip into it. But I'm only saying this so that everyone knows that my issues don't just come from that main complaint. My issues are with its story and its writing. So the first issue, The Flash 26, is actually a decent start. Wally is the only person in the Justice League who doesn't like the decision to entertain Darkseid's KO tournament, not wanting to hurt his friends, even if it is the best option. Shows how considerate he is. However, Bart follows through with Max Mercury's idea of going back in time to stop Darkseid, and I love that once Bart makes this decision, everyone except for Wally completely forgets him. Shows how dangerous his idea really was, causing Wally to jump back into that point, which unfortunately gets them both beaten up by Darkseid, until Bart escapes into the 19th century and takes Wally with him. I like that Darkseid causes both of them to not only relive some dark memories, with Wally getting beaten up by a school bully, and Bart having to go through a dangerous simulation, but with both of these experiences being amped up by the Omega energy. It really sells me on the whole Darkseid can literally be everywhere, no matter what, and it ties in pretty well with the start as both Wally and Bart have gone over these two experiences, making those moments finally pay off. However, it's only downhill from here, because in the next issue, The Flash 27, is where the story doesn't hold up. Bart and Wally are both in separate areas in the year 1908, where Bart faces the Legion of Darkseid. Basically an alternate version of the Legion of Superheroes taken under Darkseid's wing and turned evil. Not only that, but Bart also has to tussle with Whip Whirlwind, the person Max Mercury was during that time. So there's a little more personal factor here, which I like. Luckily, Bart is able to outrun Whip, only to be stopped by another corrupt Legion member, that being his cousin Jenny, aka XS, who also has super speed. Yeah, that's her name. I don't know why it's like that either. But it's here where Bart does the dumbest thing. He rushes away from her by running into a train full of people. Okay, I know his name is Impulse, but why would Bart do this? This could not only put people in danger, but it could also screw up the time stream even more, something Wally brought up in the previous issue. Was he expecting not to be seen by everyone in there? If so, how does he know Jenny won't follow him? Oh, look at that. It's something she does anyway.
You're a fucking idiot. This needs to stop. Now.
So, Bart has not only put people in danger, but is also exposing himself in a point of time that he doesn't belong in. When Wally catches up, he tells Bart off for his giant blunder, as he should. However, this brings up another problem for me. Wally is doing this while he's still on the train with Bart. Dude, you've got an entire group of corrupted super beings, including two really fast speedsters on your tail. Grab Bart and get off the train, especially since you're telling him off for getting them in danger. You guys can talk while running anyway. Oh, look at this. The rest of the Legion caught up with them. What a shock. If only Wally had just grabbed Bart and ran. But anyway, the two speedsters eventually save all the passengers, and while that's happening, the Legion decide to go back to when Barry was struck by lightning. Wally also somehow knows this is what they're doing, because I feel him and Bart were a bit too far away and preoccupied to hear what XS was saying here while the train was up in the air, and I'm not sure why he'd immediately think of that. Anyway, like I said earlier, issue 28 is the most irrelevant to the arc. mainly because it's part of the main DC KO event where every contestant gets duked it out one-on-one. Here, it's Jay Garrick Flash versus Guy Gardner Green Lantern. So you can definitely skip this one, because the only thing it has to do with the story is Wally taking Bart to Iris West for her to take care of, while he rushes to Barry before he becomes the Flash. Jay does die in this fight, which will become relevant later in the story, so there's that also. So, in issue 29, Wally catches up with Barry Allen while using a Legion ring to fly there. So if you ever wanted to see the Flash fly, this is your story, I guess. While Wally is able to get to Barry first, the Legion are not too far behind him, which does break out into a chaotic fight. Wally isn't alone though, because he is joined by Dream Girl, who was part of Darkseid's Legion but was able to break from his control as she did see what he was up to in the future. That I can actually see happening, so I'll allow it. Also, she does look pretty damn fine in that Darkseid suit. Sorry, not sorry. The fight, however, still goes in the Legion's favour, and Barry is still in the room?
What? What are you, stupid? What are you talking about?
So why didn't he try running out the door? I know he's not the Flash yet, and a Legion member probably would have caught him very quickly, but the man could have at least tried or called out for his friends. Oh, but the stupidity doesn't end here, because Bart Allen drives Iris's car straight into the room. Okay, this presents a lousy amount of world building, because this whole fight is taking place in one room, especially with Bart driving a car into the building, which should cause a whole lot of concern for the police, since Barry did ask Wally how he got past the front desk. That should imply that there are still more people in the building. This should also be causing a lot of Central City residents to be coming over to see what's going on, but that also doesn't occur for some reason. Iris also isn't at the scene for some reason. I guess she's not the focus, but when Bart left her apartment, she was very concerned for his safety as he just destroyed her car. I guess you can't outrun a car, even if the person driving it is a moron in doing so, but she still could have caught a taxi to follow him. So Bart passes out on the floor and is on the brink of death. That is until he sees Jay Garrick in the Speed Force, who tells him that it still resides in him, and that all he needs to do is bring it back. That just happens, and now Bart is in God mode, even being able to give the Speed Force back to Wally and Barry. So with both speedsters back in action and Whip Whirlwind switching sides, everything should be back to normal. That is until Darkseid temporarily takes over Dream Girl and uses her powers to show Bart that Barry is going to die in order to save the universe during the Crisis of Infinite Earths. This sends Bart into a panic, causing him to go back to the moment to prevent Barry's death. But you are so stupid it's unbelievable. Okay, so how is any of this new to Bart at all? This kid should already know about Barry's death during Crisis on Infinite Earths. This kid should already know about Barry's death since he came into the timeline when Wally was already the Flash, and he's also super close with Iris during that time, who I imagine would have told him about what happened to his grandpa. So he'd already know Barry would have died by then. But from that time until now, the man has come back to life, and while he doesn't have his powers anymore, he's still alive and well. So Bart flipping out like this is pretty useless. I understand that Darkseid might be controlling his swords to make him do it, but the book isn't super clear on that, because it seems more like Bart is still in control of himself sometimes. This brings us to the finale, where Bart drops in on Barry and tries to take over his duties of sacrificing himself to save the multiverse. Barry, however, asks Bart to fuck off as he's already made up his mind and the two fight it out. While that's going on, Darkseid reveals to his Legion that this was all part of his plan to get Impulse to kill himself by taking Barry's place and dying, thereby killing off the entire Speed Force, since Bart is an embodiment of it. Wait, an embodiment? Wouldn't you mean the embodiment? Because if he's only an embodiment, wouldn't that mean there are more of them? So, if there are more embodiments of the Speed Force, why does Darkseid need to kill only Bart? Wally finds the group to jump in and take on Darkseid and his Legion, begging him to end the suffering. But not before he catches Bart fighting with Barry and deciding to stop his friend from making a huge mistake. While Bart still believes he can take Barry's place and survive due to being an embodiment of the Speed Force, Wally reminds him that it was Barry's choice to make and that they will eventually see him once again. Before it all ends, Bart feels his grandpa in the Speed Force, catches up to him, and has this admittedly nice moment where Bart congratulates Barry for saving the universe. In a vacuum, I think this is a pretty good scene. However, all of the bullshit we had to go through to get here doesn't make this feel earned. That's where I'll leave my review, because aside from Wally and Bart jumping into a portal to join Superman, and Whip going to grab Rocky Davis and Ultivac, there isn't much else to say. Except for the fact that I think the storyline was pretty bad overall. There were some really good moments here and there, and I think the art by Vasco Georgiev was really good. Seriously, this is probably where his Flash art is at its best. I just wish the quality of his art matched the writing, because this and the Eclipso storyline are the only times we actually get to see his art, and it feels like such a waste of his talents. And speaking of art, the GOAT, Dan Mora, draws all of the covers, and they are all really well done. My favourite is easily issue 29. Just look at it, it's very beautiful. Mora should definitely draw for at least one arc in the Flash series, because I think he'd do a really good job with this character. I mean, he basically does every other DC book on the planet, so he may as well. As for the rest of the story, it felt pretty boring, and there was a lot of dumb scenes that brought the quality down and made the good moments feel a lot less earned. So, this is definitely one of the worst Flash books, which really sucks to say because this is co-written by the most prolific writer and has a really good artist on it. That's the end of the video, and I really liked making it, so I'm hoping I can keep talking about Flash comics and just other comic books in general. If that interests you, I highly recommend subscribing, hitting the notification button, and sharing this video around. I also have accounts on Instagram, Threads, and Comic Geeks if you ever want to follow me elsewhere. Anyway, I'm Jedi-Liam 64, and I think I've taken up enough of your time. So, I'll see you all later.